When I had first read the devastating news, I didn't believe it. I thought it was some kind of a sick joke, prank, trolling, something along those lines. I, of course, looked into it, and the more I researched, the more I read from multiple sources, I had to accept the truth. Fred Russell, a former Turn 10 employee, had posted to Facebook recently that Turn 10's Forza Motorsport team has been dissolved. It is no more. Former Turn 10 employee Chris Harding has also said that there's been lots of layoffs from Microsoft, including 120 from Turn 10 specifically. Now, evidently, Fred Russell has stated that what's left of Turn 10 will essentially be a support team supporting Forza Horizon in the future from Playground Games. I've taken this relatively hard, I guess about as hard as you could for a video game loss. For me, it feels like almost a death in the family of sorts. Forza Motorsport has just recently celebrated its 20th anniversary, and while I wasn't there for Forza Motorsport 1, I started into it with Forza Motorsport 2, so I've been a big fan of the series for going on 20 years now. And Turn 10 and Forza Motorsport being finished has kind of blindsided me. I'm just honestly really surprised by this. I never really saw it coming. Not only have I passionately played the games, investing a tremendous amount of time in them, but I've invested an awful lot of time outside the game, on the internet, on social media, on Facebook, on the official Forza Motorsport forums, engaging in discussions and debates and conversations about the game that we, some of us love, some of them mixed feelings. For some time now, and I'm not sure how many months it's been, I've been directly involved with the official Forza Insiders program. So with the Insiders program, those of us that were involved, we had to sign an NDA promising that we would not speak of anything that was, behind the scenes, behind closed doors, however you want to describe it. We would discuss suggestions and constructive feedback, what we did and didn't like, what we thought we would like to see implemented, or how we would like to see it implemented. Whenever they were bringing out some new content, some of us got to play test it early and provide feedback on it. And I don't know, I guess based on my involvement and all that, I was under the impression that the series still had a future. So yes, like every new game, had certain things that we liked about it, but everybody would nitpick, and there were certain things they didn't like that they thought would be better if done differently. And it honestly wasn't any different with the most recent addition to the franchise. But Turn 10 seemed to be interested in our feedback and in working with us, the player base, about what we like and don't like and what direction we like to see it in the future. And I was optimistic about the future. Maybe not necessarily the very near immediate future, but I still assumed that the franchise had many years left in it, and that maybe we would see some improvements in the years ahead that would make people more happy, things that maybe I would personally think would make it better. And then suddenly, out of the blue, all that's gone now. Now, I get why a lot of people might have no idea why this really even matters to me. Games come and go all the time. But Forza Motorsport has long since been kind of near and dear to my heart. And it's not just me. The other day I had to break the news to my son, who is just now 10 years old. Forza Motorsport was special to him too, because it was his first gaming memory. He doesn't remember playing anything before Forza Motorsport. Now, of course, over the years, he's done a lot since then, but Forza Motorsport was the first game that he remembers ever playing, and as far as I'm aware, it probably was. For me personally, Forza Motorsport is significant because it shifted my interest in racing gaming from more arcadey, more casual stuff to the more realistic, more serious stuff. And that's not to say that I don't still enjoy Mario Kart and Burnout and that sort of thing, but used to be, that was pretty much all I played, was the more silly, far less realistic stuff. And then at one point on Xbox 360, I was looking at my next racing game, and I was looking at, as I recall, some playable demos of a couple that I was choosing between. One of them was Forza Motorsport 2, a franchise I had not yet played up to that point, and Project Gotham Racing 3 or 2 maybe. As I recall, I tried both of them, and bearing in mind that I, up to that point, didn't do Gran Turismo and that sort of thing, and so I went with Project Gotham Racing, and I enjoyed it quite a bit, but by the time I was done with it, I felt like this isn't as Mario Karty as what I had been playing, and you know what, maybe I'm more interested in trying some of the more semi-realistic stuff. So then after I wrapped up Project Gotham Racing, I think 2, I went back and grabbed Forza Motorsport 2 and never really looked back. Now, bearing in mind that I had come to Forza Motorsport from Mario Kart, Burnout, Need for Speed, Ridge Racer, etc., I at first wasn't quite ready to dive head first into the deep end with all the assists off and everything. So when I did Forza Motorsport 2, I think I ran all the assists, basically traction control, anti-lock brakes, etc., all the way through my Forza Motorsport 2 time. But then when I got into Forza Motorsport 3, I started dabbling with stepping up my game and toggling one by one each of these off. Since then, to this day, every racing game I pick up, I immediately go into the options and turn off all the assists. And one of the noteworthy ones for me was turning off the automatic transmission. Now, in real life, I did have a little bit of experience driving a stick shift in my dad's old pickup truck, but it was something I never really did in real life, and in gaming I wasn't used to doing. But Forza Motorsport eased me into a manual transmission, and again, like everything else, I've never looked back. Prior to me playing Forza Motorsport 2, I did briefly try Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec, but again remembering that up to that point I had done the Need for Speed, Ridge Racer, etc., and I just had a tough time getting used to the physics in Gran Turismo 3. As I recall, having a lot of trouble keeping the car on the track, not figuring out how to adequately make the turns. After playing some Forza Motorsport, I did eventually pick up Gran Turismo 5 and 6 and played them pretty extensively. But while there were certain things I liked about Gran Turismo, and I'm not going to get too much into Gran Turismo versus Forza Motorsport, there were things I didn't really care for that I felt kind of ruined the experience. It wasn't necessary. A few design tweaks could have made all the difference in the world, but in general, I favored Forza Motorsport over Gran Turismo. And I feel like the significance of Forza Motorsport can't really be exaggerated or overstated. Now, yes, of course, the same can be said for Gran Turismo, and in fact, it seemed like Forza Motorsport was Microsoft's answer to Gran Turismo. But Gran Turismo was the benchmark by which console racing games were judged on PlayStation 1 and 2, but by PlayStation 3 versus 360, Forza Motorsport became the benchmark that all racing games were judged by. Now, that hasn't necessarily been the case since then. In more recent generations, Xbox One and the current generation, I feel like there's been more nitpicking of Forza Motorsport from 5 onwards. Plus, there's been stiffer competition, I think, from other offerings on the market, Project Cars, Assetto Corsa, etc. But the Forza Motorsport franchise has definitely left its mark on the racing game industry. Looking back to PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, remembering I had played Forza Motorsport 2 onward, I went and played Gran Turismo 5 and 6 on the same generation. At that time, there was just so much neat stuff that was going on Forza Motorsport that was clearly lacking on Gran Turismo at the same time. Even though I didn't really care for multiplayer, I joked I don't play well with others. With Forza Motorsport, I still felt like I was part of a community anyways, even though I wasn't racing directly against other players. There were other ways that we could engage with each other indirectly through the community. Players created their own custom content and shared it. I could make custom graphics you could put on your car. I could download yours. We could share tuning setups. We could share interesting race replays. A lot of neat stuff. And while in more recent years, the livery editor has got some criticisms of feeling kind of stagnant and outdated, at the time it was really advanced relatively and kind of revolutionary. And at the same time, Gran Turismo was sitting there with no such thing. While Turn 10 Forza Motorsport didn't invent the idea of a livery editor, I remember dabbling with one on N64, for example, on Top Gear Rally. I felt like it was a big influence on subsequent livery editors in other racing game series since. Something else that pops into my mind is Forza Motorsport had a rewind option. And while they probably didn't come up with it, it's the first game that I personally remember playing that had an option to rewind. But I've noticed that several different gaming series since have had a similar feature, but I've never ran into it that I can recall before Forza Motorsport. Something else that comes to mind that influenced games since then is Forza's Performance Index. For folks that might not be aware, the Performance Index, or PI, is a numerical rating applied to cars, and it would vary depending on what you did to the car. If you upgrade it, it improves its Performance Index rating. But the idea was it would give you a rough general idea of the general performance characteristics of the car. And in theory, two cars with very similar PI ratings should have a pretty close race between each other. Now, of course, that's going to vary quite a bit depending on the specific build and a specific track. Some tracks favor top speed, others would favor handling. But it was an effort at leveling the playing field between totally different cars. Since then, I've seen several other racing game series do something similar. Now, of course, they didn't call it Performance Index or PI. They would come up with their own term for it, but the principle was essentially the same. Perhaps, I don't know if I'd say ironically or what, but maybe the biggest contribution that Forza Motorsport made to the gaming industry, racing specifically, is Forza Horizon. I mean, originally Forza Motorsport was the mainline series, and Forza Horizon was just a one-off spin-off, but ended up being popular with people, and maybe people that wouldn't be interested in Forza Motorsport. And it has since had as many sequels almost as Forza Motorsport itself. And now here we are, Forza Motorsport is officially dead, and Forza Horizon is more popular than ever. Now, just a few days before I found out that Forza Motorsport was being axed, at work I had discussed with a friend about our mutual feelings about the Forza Motorsport franchise as of late. He had specifically stated that he felt like he didn't really feel a need to hop back into Forza Motorsport right now. And me, while there's a lot of things that I still like about the most recent Forza Motorsport, I kind of felt like they're lacking a bit of direction, for lack of a better way of describing it. And that left me kind of discussing and looking at where to go from Forza Motorsport. Not that I was going to completely abandon it. Like I said, it's still near and dear to my heart, but I was going to need something else. But I didn't want Forza Motorsport to die. And like I said, I was still kind of optimistic, maybe cautiously so, about its future. But now here I am left with basically no choice but to look to something else to fill that void for me. So now at this point, I don't know what else to really do except maybe thank Turn 10 and Forza Motorsport for 20 really wonderful years of racing gaming.